What was the most impressive thing about the Buccaneers win on Sunday? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Klosky at eKlosky WTSP. We are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I am the editor-in-chief over at the 813.tv. And, of course, Evan is on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com. And you can catch the show every Monday through Friday along with the Everydayers. For that, I want to share our appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. How do the Bucs keep the pedal to the metal on a short week against a division rival? And of course, Klosky's crystal ball comes out for the predictions in a little bit. But let's start with what was the most impressive thing about this past weekend. And the Bucs go from getting absolutely dominated by the Broncos at home, which, to be fair, I mean, it looks like the Broncos defense might legitimately be for real. But, you know, they go from that loss to just absolutely bullying the Eagles in every facet of the game. Evan, what did you come away from in that game being the most impressed by?
Just the operations from Liam Cohen and that offense. They had a great game plan. Surgical. Baker Mayfield was decisive with the football. His time to throw was like 2.05 seconds. That's Tom Brady in his final years in Tampa Bay. That's what he was doing out there when he was scared, you know what, with his offensive line. So the fact was they didn't, especially in the first half, Baker wasn't fidgety. He said, this is the coverage. This is where I'm going with the ball. Boom, it's out of my hands. He wasn't looking to do too much. They also were working more underneath versus actually doing things that were down the field. They allowed some of that down the field stuff to happen in due time. But overall, I just thought, you know, week 3, we got the worst of Baker Mayfield. And then once again in week 4, we saw the best of what he can do. And, you know, for the most part, in 3 of the 4 games this year, you've gotten an elite version of Baker. And, yeah, I 100% agree with you. You know, the Denver defense is absolutely legit. It's the Denver offense, which is horrific. So it's the fact that kind of the Buccaneers bled some yards and, you know, after that first drive, didn't really give up much to that offense. It was a lot of field goals, but still, you know, it was a mix of a really good defense and not being there mentally, physically. It was just a stinker. And the Buccaneers are going to have another stinker at some point this year where we just look at it and go, what the hell was that? So that's one of them. You know, I tend to believe that you're going to get, you know, I always say this, there's going to be 3 games you circle where it's like, wow, that was the best version of them. Then there's going to be 3 games you circle that's like, wow, that was the worst version of them. And then you kind of figure out who the team is with those games in the middle. So I would imagine the Broncos will be one of the bottom 3. And I do think the Eagles will be one of the top 3, though the Commanders look like a top 3 one as well.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say is that the Commanders, who would have thought that a win over the Commanders like they had in week 1 would, you know, a month into the season be as impressive as it is. I mean, Jaden Daniels is just absolutely incredible, and the Commanders just keep winning.
And you got to remember, that was a team for the Buccaneers who was fairly healthy in that game. So you think about it, they didn't, I will say, they missed Zion McCollum for some of it. They didn't have Kalijah Cansey, but Antoine Winfield Jr. was out there. Luke Gedeke was out there. So they had some more working parts than what you're seeing right now. And the hope is, we still don't know what the injury situation is going to be Thursday night, but certainly after the 11 days off heading to New Orleans, we expect a surge of players to return to that lineup, most notably Luke Gedeke, Kalijah Cansey, and Antoine Winfield Jr., who should be very close to returning.
And going back to last week, even though you weren't on the show, you still said in your predictions, and you said, bold prediction, this team's getting 3 sacks. They said, all right, Evan, we see you, and we're going to double that.
Wasn't bold enough.
What was it about the pass rush in this one that was just so unstoppable? Was it the return of Vita Vea? Was it the mismatches they were able to create against the Philadelphia Eagles? Was it the fact that Hurts didn't really have any options that he could go to, that he really trusted in a game script that just said, we have to keep throwing the football? Why was the pass rush as good as it was compared to kind of how weak it's been the first couple of weeks of the season?
It was a good matchup for Tampa Bay. One of the reasons why I went to that and thinking it was going to, resurface, Vita Vea was returning, or we thought he was going to return, at least in a limited role. But B, we saw what that playoff game was last year against Jalen Hurts. We know that Jalen Hurts is not comfortable with tons of pressure. So we knew that Todd Bowles was going to dial it up way more than he did in the past. Especially against like Denver, he did it 25% of the time, which was like unheard of for Todd. But you knew he was going to come after him. Lane Johnson was in concussion protocol, so there were some issues there on the offensive line, which is why I think Yaya Diaby was able to eat against the former Buck Fred Johnson. So there were a lot of reasons why I thought they were going to be able to get after him. I didn't think 6. I thought 3 was pretty bold, considering they only had 2 entering that game. But, kind of reminds me like a little bit of last year, that Bears game they had at home, where it was just like they just kept getting after Justin Fields. And we didn't really see that performance too much again as far as the sack numbers. But it was a really good matchup, a really good game plan. And the Eagles, once again, didn't have an answer for the blitz packages that Todd Bowles was presenting. And he's one of the best at doing it. So, certainly impressive. The pressure numbers from Yaya Diaby are incredible. He ranks top 5 in the NFL in pressure rate, and that's alongside the names of like Aiden Hutchinson, Myles Garrett, Jared Verse is up there, solid pick for the Rams. But when you see Yaya Diaby right below Aiden Hutchinson and Myles Garrett, he's doing something correctly. So I think that's why the pass rush was able to work a little bit more, on top of the fact that Levante David had just an unbelievable game. And that was vintage Levante David. 4th time in his career he had 2 sacks. He forced a fumble. Was that forced fumble was absolutely the play of the game. He was on his P's and Q's in the rushing attack as well with Saquon Barkley. The Eagles broke off that one long run, but that was pretty much it. So, he's a special player. Vita is a key cog in that defense. And, I just keep thinking about when Cansey returns, if Yaya Diaby continues to look like the guy that we think he is, I want to see, he certainly wants to see more sack numbers, but that's okay. If the pressures are still there between him, Vea, and Cansey, someone's going to eat. And then all of a sudden, this pass rush that I've been worried about is going to look a lot better with those 3 in the fold. So, but that's going to be the difference between Yaya going from like great to elite, is getting those sack numbers, because that's what Myles Garrett and Aiden Hutchinson do, right? Myles eats up double teams. Aiden Hutchinson gets to sack numbers. He also takes doubles and chips. So that's the whole point, is Yaya going to be a guy that gets doubled or chipped, because then that will open up one-on-one scenarios for Kancey, who should be the major beneficiary, considering they're also going to have to double Vea.
All right, well, it's a short week and a division rival on the road. How do the Bucs stay in the win column? That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, because unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players leaves in the first half and doesn't return. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. It's super simple to play. You just pick more or less than a player's stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive your $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. The new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every single day. First, the Madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it is twice a day. Make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. The Falcons are coming off of a big win of their own against the New Orleans Saints. Younghoe Koo sends the Falcons home winners with, a 50-plus yarder, which is just what Younghoe Koo does. And they have now won 2 in a row after starting 0-2. It's a short week. The Bucs are really banged up, and it seems like they add 4 or 5 names to the injury report every day. But how does this Bucs team, more specifically the Bucs defense, attack the Falcons on Thursday and keep themselves in the win column?
First off, you got to protect the football. And I know that's like a cliche sort of answer, but the only reason the Falcons beat the Saints is because they got 2 turnovers for touchdowns. They didn't score an offensive touchdown in that game. It was Koo and those 2, the fumble recovery and the interception that were housed. So sometimes it's as simple as just make sure that you are protecting the football. And if you got to punt versus do something silly like that, that's okay. So that's number 1 on the board. Number 2 is you have to take advantage of the Falcons' offensive line, which is a little bit banged up right now. Currently, they're maybe McGarry plays. I don't really know right now. We're gonna find that out. But they potentially could be down 2 starting offensive linemen. That's a significant issue for a team that has a statue back there in Kirk Cousins. Now, Cousins typically does well in cover 2, cover 4. Todd Bowles likes to run cover 2, cover 4. So will Todd adjust to what Kirk is doing out there? But currently, I think you're going to have to dial up pressure once again on Kirk and have a little bit of a similar game plan that you had against Hurts. Not 1-for-1 apples to apples here, but Cousins, he'll get some on you, right? He's going to notice the pressures. He's going to get rid of the ball, and he's going to make terrific decisions. But you can also get 1 or 2 significant sacks on him. Go back to the Minnesota game last year. Remember the Antoine Winfield Jr. sack that was recovered that fumble, that sack fumble that was recovered deep in their zone. I mean, those are sort of the things that you can do, and it's a different offensive system than what Bowles studied Kirk last year, but they know the QB, they know the tendencies, and ipso facto, Kirk Cousins knows a little bit about Bowles as well. He's been around the block, so I would like to see a lot of pressure, dial it up again. Going to have to be a big Diaby day, and then offensively speaking, I think you're going to have to run the ball. You are going to have. I mean, this is not a good run defense. It's not a good defense that can also sack the quarterback either. So Baker, shouldn't be toe tapping in the pocket, right? There shouldn't be that much pressure, but they do have to establish the run and making sure they kind of gut the defensive line of Atlanta, because they do have a strong secondary, and you do not want to lose this game because you were burnt by their safeties. So that's, to me, the key, Bates and Simmons. So that's the key to me is continue to work underneath, continue to work quickly, take your spots where you can, establish the run and dial up pressure in hopes of somewhere in that drive, Cousins making a mistake and taking a huge loss. Because, if they're not a great red zone team, I think they only have 5 offensive touchdowns this entire season. So it's okay to bleed some yards while the Falcons are driving. If you continue to stick to it, all you need is one big play per drive to kind of stop them in their tracks, force them to a field goal, force them to a punt, whatever it might be. But that, to me, I think is the winning formula.
Now, it seemed like Luke Goedeke was on track to return this past week. He doesn't clear concussion protocol, doesn't play. Justin School plays really well, in his third start of the season. You go back to last week, Goedeke was a full participant by the end of the week. Now through 2 practices, and I use the term loosely because it is a short week and there's the walkthrough and all of that. But Goedeke's back to being limited. Do you think that Goedeke is going to have a shot at getting on the field in this one? Or at this point, do you think the Bucs just say, you know what, let's just wait? You kind of touched on it earlier. Let's just wait. We have the mini bye coming up. Then we play the New Orleans Saints. That's when we can bring back Luke. Hopefully we bring back Cansey and Antoine and the rest of some of these key pieces.
To me, I know that, like, big picture wise, it would be cool to think like, hey, just take the extra week, come back when you can. But if Goedeke is cleared, Goedeke has to play. Like, as much as I want to take that big picture view, you are playing the Atlanta Falcons, a team who you think is going to be there at the end of the season near the top of your division. This is a must-win game. I don't want to say must-win. It's not like if they lose this game, they're in trouble. But these divisional games mean more than any other game on your schedule. They just do. Divisional games, conference games, whatever. Like the Broncos game, whatever. I'm hoping that Broncos game was so bad because they were looking forward to Eagles-Falcons, right? If they can take care of business against the Falcons, that's what I'm going to take away from that game, is that they weren't prepared from coaches down to players as well as they should have been. And that would be okay to me if they go 2-0 in those games. But no, I think that if you can play, you throw them out there. You just this is not your typical Thursday night stinker of a game where the Bucs are on, and not that this is a stinker of a game, but like the Bucs at Bills last year. It was just like an AFC game, NFC game. You knew the Bills were a great team. If you lost it, who cared? You were expected to lose. You were about a touchdown underdog. But yeah, between Antoine, those guys, they can play. You suit them up. I do lean towards being a little bit more cautious on Cansey if he's not full go with the calf, because whereas, Goedeke's the, concussion, and being symptom free. So there's really no wiggle room there. And Antoine's a foot issue, but if Cansey has a setback, it's going to be another 5 weeks. So that's the risk you run.
All right. Well, the crystal ball comes out. Evan brings his predictions coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. The Buccaneers have jumped back to second in the odds to win the NFC South, despite the fact that they're in first place, and they currently sit at plus 195, trailing the Atlanta Falcons, who they face on Thursday, who are at plus 165 to win the division and are 1.5-point favorites against the Bucs on Thursday night. Get started this week with your $200 in bonus bets just for placing a $5 bet at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP Wednesday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and it's a Thursday night Amazon Prime Time matchup between the Bucs and the Falcons. I hate Thursday night football, and I will die on the hill that if the NFL actually cared about player safety, Thursday night football would be abolished, but they don't. And they just make all of the money. However, I do love
money. They care about player safety, but they don't care about it as enough to take some dollars out of their pockets. That's for darn sure.
Right. But I do love listening to Kirk Herbstreit call football games. So I'm excited for the broadcast.
Go Buckeyes.
No, that poor guy. He had to move out of his home because he was being harassed so much for not picking the Buckeyes all the time. God forbid we be unbiased and try to, just do our jobs. Anyway, that's enough about Kirk Herbstreit, but I do love him. Evan, it is time to break out the crystal ball. Let's get those predictions in, and let's start with your predictive player of the game.
I'm torn here. I'm really torn because I think this can be a nice splashy spot for Yaya Diaby. But you know what? I'm going to go with Rachaad White. I think that this is a game where the Buccaneers are going to have to work underneath. I think this is a game where they're going to have to run the football. Rachaad White did a pretty good job last year in Atlanta in that game where that pretty much saved their season. That was the huge momentum swing to make the playoffs. That game, again, we work under the guys here for everyone out there. Baker Mayfield's not allowed. It's just too easy of a pick. Quarterbacks, no. But yeah, I Bucky could be that guy. Yaya Diaby could be that guy. But I've been on the record stating that I think a lot of the Rachaad White, Bucky stuff has been overblown. I am still a firm believer in Rachaad White in his role. I'm a firm believer in Bucky Irving and his role. It's clear that Liam Cohen knows how to use Bucky a little bit better than Rachaad. But getting Rachaad involved in the passing game, something they really didn't do week 2 and week 3, and they went back to it last week, it proves again he is magic in open space. So he was successful last year in Atlanta, kind of in open space. Go back to that. And I would imagine that with their secondary, the wide receivers aren't going to be as open as normal. So why not dump it to that guy and find ways to get him going? So I'm going to say Rachaad White. And maybe the rushing numbers aren't amazing, but give me 6 receptions, 60 yards and a tutty, and then some rushing yards on top. I'm talking 100 total yards here and a tutty. Something like that is where I see him thriving.
So let's say you have Rachaad White and you have Bucky Irving on your fantasy team. Are you starting Rachaad over Bucky? I'm asking for a friend.
I mean, it depends what other options your friend has, because it like, to me, it was a little bit interesting to see Bucky get so many red zone carries last week. But I am curious if Bucky got those carries last week because it was a short week this week, and Rachaad is going to be utilized more in the short yardage situations on Thursday, and they didn't want to pulverize his body, and you kind of conserve him for the pain that happens in the red zone. So I don't know if that's true, but if you had to pick one, I'm picking Rachaad. And to me, Rachaad has more of a path to more fantasy points than Bucky, despite Bucky looking better in the rushing game. I think that Bucky maybe is more of a better real life player than a fantasy player when compared to Rachaad. But Rachaad has a role on this team. It should be third down, red zone, and Bucky should get carries in the chunks of the field, first and second down. They're both probably going to get the same amount of touches, but game script matters as well. So, to me, between the two this week, I'll go Rachaad.
All right. How about your bold prediction for this week?
Bold prediction. So last week I said 3 sacks.
Indeed.
They got 6. All right. They now have 8 on the year. So I think it's fair to say that in 4 games, they have 8 sacks. It's still a bold prediction to go 4 sacks.
Ooh.
I think they're going to go. Yeah.
We're doubling down on the sacks back-to-back weeks here.
I think they'll be able to get after and maybe Thursday right before the game when we have the inactives come out, maybe I shift based on what the Falcons have. But man, Kirk just doesn't have any mobility in that pocket. And with the Bulls' defensive game plan, how he schemes up those blitzes, my belief in Yaya, the return of Vita, I think that we might see another game where they can get after this guy, and it will be by committee, right? Even last game, Logan Hall, Levante David 2, Vita Vea 1, Diaby 1, Anthony Nelson 1, right? It doesn't always have to be one guy. The pressures might come most from Diaby, but it's going to be by committee. And I'll say that they get after Kirko and get his butt on the ground 4 times.
He has been sacked 6 times this season in 4 games. And what's funny is in week 1, he sacked twice, week 2 once, week 3 twice, week 4 once. So the law of averages says that the Bucs should get 2. But I like your number better.
It's a bold prediction, and I just think with short rest on a body that's still kind of beaten up, I don't know. That's my bold. Though I guess some people might say that my Rachaad White take could be bold too. So
it could be, but and then maybe an other team bold is that Kyle Pitts is going to get all the receptions, because Bucs fans know this all too well. Raheem Morris brought out the stats are for losers quote because Pitts had no catches against the New Orleans Saints. So
Pitts had success against the Bucs last year.
Levante's going to have some work
in Tampa. Yeah, specifically in Tampa. Levante did a pretty good job with Goddard this past week. There was the heat as the game wore on. I felt like both teams were kind of bending. So the heat mattered last week. And typically, it's weather, it's the same for both. It is. And that's fine. But it also, there was a tackle where Jamel Dean got, driven 10 yards back because he didn't make it. In the time, I was like, that's weak. After talking with the players, listening to them and being out there and being into the second half, it's he was probably just cooked. So it just it is what it is. But that won't be an issue this time around. It'll be nice and cozy indoors.
All right. Well, the 3-1 Bucs take on the 2-2 Falcons, who are still the favorites to win the NFC South.
They're still the favorites.
After week 3, the Bucs dropped to number 3 in the odds. After this past weekend, the Falcons went up to number 1. The Bucs went up to number 2. The Saints dropped to number 3.
Interesting.
So,
I mean, again, the Bucs have a tougher schedule still.
They do.
But having said that, the Falcons' schedule doesn't look as sexy as we once thought it would be. Right?
And
they got to play. They got to play the Commanders late in the season. That looks like a tough game that the Bucs have already gotten out of early in the year. They have to play the Vikings, who look like a great team. Who we thought that game, non-playoff team. They don't have a quarterback. They just lost Cousins, and there's the revenge factor for the Vikings with Kirk returning. So
Sam Darnold for MVP.
Easy there, Tiger. Yeah, I'm just ultimately, when you look at their schedule, it's not as soft. I mean, it was like Falcons soft to schedule, and then there's like everybody else, like a huge drop off. I don't think it's like that anymore, though. The Bucs still have to go through the Ravens, the Chiefs, a healthy Niners team. We don't know if Christian McCaffrey will be back by then, but
probably not.
I would assume not. But
the Chiefs don't even look as formidable as they did this time 3 weeks ago. But I get it. It's Patrick
but here's
Mahomes,
the thing about
the
thing about the Chiefs is that they don't, and go back to their team last year. They did not win that Super Bowl because of their offense. They won that because their defense is so good, and their defense is still so good. There are legitimate offensive questions with the Chiefs, but when they go on the road Monday night to play that team in their house against that defense, I want to see what Liam Cohen does against that squad. That will show a lot, and that's also an AFC game, which,
if they lose, it's whatever.
It might be a game that they say screw it.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I gotta give the
score prediction.
Sorry, we went on a tangent here. Score prediction is divisional game. Mm-hmm. I have a tough time believing this is not going to be down to the wire. I think the Buccaneers are going to win this thing 20-18. This is going to be a nail biter of a game, and I think it's going to come down to the fact that the Buccaneers' red zone defense is going to keep Tampa Bay in this long enough while they find footing offensively. And ultimately, the Buccaneers' offense has more of an ability, I think, to land a strong right hook than the Falcons' offense. I think that the Falcons' offense might win the yardage battle on Thursday night. But I think the Bucs can deliver more than knockout blows, just these strong right hooks. And I think that's how the Bucs will kind of get this lead. But yeah, this is going to be a great game, not a fun game to watch as a fan because you're going to be nervous throughout. But these are how the divisional games go. I do not think this is going to be a blowout one way or the other. It's going to come down to the fourth quarter and protecting the football.
All right. Well, let everybody know what's going on over on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com.
Hey, we are full on all over the Bucs season right now. Because of the hurricane last week, because of Thursday Night Football this week, we do not have the Blitz airing back-to-back weeks, as much as it pains our hearts. But we will be back Week 6 previewing the Saints game. So we will have that for you. When we do, that's 10tampabay.com, 10 Tampa Bay Plus. Hit up our YouTube page. We'll get James involved as well. He's going to have a couple of weeks off from his burning question. But yeah, I mean, the hockey season also starts next Friday for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So we're going to get that involved as well. So just make sure you check us out in all those places, and also hit me up at eCloskey, WTSP. I'm always posting some all 22 videos, some Bucs thoughts throughout the week. So feel free to send me some questions. I'll respond.
All right, that is going to do it for this episode. like you said, follow everything on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at Yarcho_Bucs, at eKlosky WTSP. Follow on YouTube, turn on those notifications or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to sign up or click the link in the show notes. And of course, check out everything that Evan is doing on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com. Check out everything I'm doing over at the 813.tv. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.